Right guys, so I am here with Will. He is the winner of this year's Norway, or Bikepacking Around Norway.
Harder. I think naively I wasn't quite expecting the full Norwegianness of the of the route profile. Very, very hilly. The climbs were brutal. I was warned in advance to be careful about the weather. Norwegian weather can be pretty bad, so I'm told. We actually had it pretty good in that sense. There were some days of rain in the beginning, but there was quite a lot of sunshine as well, uncharacteristically so, I'm told. So in that sense, it was good, but the climbing was really, really brutal. It was a little bit of both. The main thing was to just do it as best as I could and just see what happened. But I kind of thought, well, I know I can be fairly fast, so I thought, maybe I could win it as well. But in the beginning, I was just thinking, I'll take it at the pace that I know that I can do, and then just see what happens. So that worked out quite well. It was mostly a matter of gaining experience as well, because I haven't done a bike race like this in such length before. So there were loads and loads of questions I had in my mind about what's going to happen when I need to sleep. How much sleep should I get? How should I pace myself in the beginning? I don't really know. So I knew that there was plenty of stuff that could go wrong. So the main thing was just to learn really and do the best I could. As it happened, it worked out quite well in the end, and I got a time I'm pretty happy with. Vousden was pretty tough, but I always knew that was going to be hard, because right from the get-go you can see it on the map. You go straight down, you go straight back up. It's 1,000 meters. What more is there to say? But also the lead into that was really tough, and I didn't expect that. There was a lot of, just to get to the climb, just so you can go down it, there's a huge amount of up and down, no flat ground at all. You're kind of spending most of your time switching between your smallest gear and your biggest gear, just constantly wearing out your brake levers, your shifting levers rather, trying to do that. I think that was probably the hardest climb. The climbs later on in the rides were also really tough, just because I was exhausted. But I think on paper, probably Vousden. Seeing all of Norway in such beautiful weather was really special. But also seeing the breadth of, different landscapes, the kind of diversity of landscapes was nice as well. There weren't many boring moments. I really liked the Atlantic Highway. I didn't expect to be so enthralled by that. It was nice just to be on the Atlantic coast and have, the sea stretching out when you've spent so much time in the mountains, as a counterpoint to amazing places like Geiranger, and Trollstigen was another massive highlight for me. It felt like being an ant in a cathedral there. It was really amazing. I was trying to catch Kai, who was in the lead. Or rather, I was kind of doing my own pace and just saying, maybe I'll catch him, maybe I won't. And there was kind of a little bit of pressure from me there, just to see if I could catch up with him. And then, when I passed him, I think he had to pull out with, he had to drop out with some leg problems. Then being in the lead was a great feeling. But at the same time, having gone from being chasing somebody to not being chasing somebody anymore, kind of changes your mindset somehow. So now you're just chasing yourself. It's like you're the only, the only opponent in some way. Like, I've just got to go as fast as I can, and that requires a kind of a different mindset. It requires more discipline in a way, because when you're chasing somebody, it's like they're down the road. I've just got to catch them. Whereas when you're on your own, you've really got to be like, no, do I really need this stop? No, I don't. Do I have to stop to get this drink? No, I can keep going. And it makes things a bit more complicated, I think. It makes your kind of mental calculus a bit more involved. It's kind of like it's an external thing. It's just like there's some kind of time pressure, not time pressure, but pressure to keep going. Otherwise, you might get caught, or you might not catch the person you're trying to catch. And in a way, it just makes it really simple. It's just that if you need to stop the bike, clock starts ticking, get back on the bike as soon as you can. And it makes it kind of a little bit breathless and a bit, well, obviously, a little bit kind of, relentless, but in the same way, it's also quite simple. So I was trying not to look at the tracker for a long time because I didn't really want to, I knew what I had to do. I knew I just had to, go as fast as I could, do as much distance per day as I could. And I didn't really want to spook myself by looking at, this guy is really close, because ultimately it doesn't make a difference, right? You're all on your own. And what that guy does doesn't make any difference. I have my schedule, and if my objective is to finish as quickly as possible, it doesn't matter where anybody else is. So I was trying to avoid looking at the tracker for that reason. When I heard that I'd passed, that I was now in the lead, that kind of made me think, well, okay, let's take this a bit more seriously. At that point, I started thinking a little bit more, I wonder how far back they are. But I wouldn't say it really changed that much about how I was doing things. My strategy remained the same, my pacing was the same, because my objective was always the same. My objective was just to finish as quickly as possible. So, yeah, that's an interesting question. It's something I've had problems with in long rides in the past. Like I said, this is my first ride of this distance. Previously, the longest I'd ridden was at 1,500, so a bit less than half the distance. But what I have found is that I do kind of get quite lonely in these rides. It's just a very solitary experience. And on the one hand, that's part of the reason I do it, because I like the kind of solitude and being on my own, but at the same time, nobody can live without people, so you do long for some kind of human contact at some point. And sometimes I end up kind of thinking about, I'd love to be, doing this thing with my girlfriend or with my family or something, I'd love to be having a nicer life right now. And certainly for the first few days, those thoughts kind of did prey on me a lot. I was thinking, I've been on the bike for 24 hours, 48 hours, I want to be back with my girlfriend at home. But I found after a few days, it started to kind of normalize. And it was like, I kind of started to forget about what came before, and it was like, this is my life now. I'm riding my bike every day. The important thing is what's happening here, maybe what I'm going to do tomorrow, what I'm aiming for. And at that point it becomes, if not easier, like simpler. You don't get these distractions of, the stuff that you wish you had or you miss from home or whatever, because now this is your life, and you're just focused on the task at hand, which is riding your bike. And I found that wasn't deliberate, it just happened after a few days, right? And that's when my brain started to kind of adjust, I think, to the reality. So of course it was all made a lot more complicated by coronavirus, because for a while, it wasn't clear whether it was even going to happen or whether I'd be able to get here from Germany, because of travel restrictions and all of that. I signed up, I think, in February or March, and for a few months, I was like, well, there's this thing, I might be doing it if I can get to Norway, I might not be. So I wasn't really thinking about it too much, because I didn't want to get myself all psyched up for it and then all of a sudden have to pull out because, coronavirus got worse. But when it became clear that it was actually going to go ahead, that I was going to do it, then, it got real, and it became a really big deal very, very quickly. I had to start thinking about, the logistics, planning, simple things like how to get here, but also, trying to figure out my strategy, understanding the route, understanding what I was going to pack, trying to think up all of these contingencies, because again, when you don't have a lot of experience doing something, you end up trying to think things through a lot and overthink stuff, which is in its own way quite tiring. And I would say, for a month and a half before the start, I was spending most of my time worrying about this. It was always there as like a thing in the back of my head that, oh yeah, in a few weeks' time I've got this big ride to do. So that's a really big part of the event. practice. I started doing these sorts of, I developed an interest for it about, I don't know, nearly 10 years ago. I kind of figured that long riding would be fun, doing distances of 200, 300 kilometers in a day, which at the time was new for me. Then I got into the Audax scene, so randonneuring I think it's also called, where you do distances of 200, 300, 400, 600, 1,000, with a time limit, but no specific pressure to go quickly. And that's how I kind of got into it. And I just, if you do a lot of those, then you start to understand how your body works in those circumstances. So there's a lot of stuff to learn about, like nutrition. That's something I learnt. I remember exactly when I learned how to handle my nutrition on long rides, when I had an incident where I had only cereal bars for hundreds and hundreds of kilometers and sugary stuff, and it made me feel sick, and then I lost my appetite and I nearly had to abandon because I couldn't eat anything. So the lesson I learned there was don't eat cereal bars, eat real food. And of course all of this stuff depends entirely on who you are and what works for you, but I think it's just a question of collecting experience in a few key areas over, by doing rides, kind of gradually building up to the distances you're interested in. Things like nutrition, fatigue, pacing, also your state of mind, and just understanding how you approach a challenge like that. It certainly helps to have done a lot of practice at long distance rides, because then certain elements of it become second nature. So while I spent 9.5 days riding my bike, and that was very new to me, it's quite easy for me to go and jump on a bike and do 300 kilometers in a day just as a one-off, because I've done it so many times that it becomes kind of, you don't have to think about it too much. So once you get those kind of basics nailed down, that's the foundation for the next building block for the next kind of distance step. So it's a question of building gradually and just learning, gathering that experience as you go. Yeah, I learned as much about Norwegian bus shelters as anybody can learn in their lifetime. I stayed in a bus shelter every night except 3, I think. The other 2 were in church graveyards, which turns out are nicer than you might think, if it's not raining. And also in the ferry terminal, which had a heated waiting room, which was a really nice treat. But no, bus shelters most of the way. I think I was wondering at the beginning of the ride whether I would end up staying in cabins or hotels. In the end, I found the flexibility of staying where I wanted to much more valuable, because it's quite easy to find a bus shelter in advance on Google Maps. You can actually search for bus stop and you can find it right there. And then you can use Street View to see if there's actually a shelter there and if there, what it looks like. So, and this is quite quick, you can find somewhere to sleep for the night, usually in about 5 minutes using your phone. And then you just rock up there and you can make a few alternatives if that one's not at the right place when you want to sleep. It gives a lot of flexibility, which for me outweighs the advantages of having somewhere a bit warmer and more comfortable. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so if you book a hotel, then you're committed to it, and you've got to reach the specific point, and also you probably have to reach it by a particular time, because unless you find one with 24-hour check-in, you've got a time limit now as well. So and that puts extra stress. It maybe forces you to ride harder than you otherwise should do. Whereas if you've got a bus shelter and it's like, oh, I'm not going to make this one, doesn't matter, I'll just get there a bit later, or I'll pick the one closer to me. You can adjust because things go wrong, right? You could have a puncture which takes you an hour to fix. In that case, if you have a deadline to meet, then you'll be in trouble. Yeah. So the thing is that, of course, depending on your sleep schedule, you're probably going to be arriving quite late. So I was arriving around 10:30 or later than that. And by that time, the buses aren't running anymore. There's not too much traffic on the roads. And then I'd be leaving around 4 a.m. and of course, nobody's up at that time. So you'd have people driving past, on the roads, but I never had anybody stop. I never had any trouble with it. It doesn't seem to be an issue really. Yeah, so one of the things about this ride is just how much I learnt. So I started the ride, or went into the ride, with so many questions in my head. that I just didn't have the answer to. I started building contingencies for them and thinking, I could do this or that. I could sleep in bus shelters, or maybe that's not so sensible, or maybe I need this much sleep, or maybe that's enough, or I don't know. What's my body going to be feeling like after 8 days in the saddle? I just don't know. I've never done it before. And there was the biggest thing for me for this ride is how much experience came out of it. So just having done just one, I now feel like I could do another one with so much more confidence, because I know, for example, that if it comes to it in a pinch, even if I'm soaking wet and it's really, really cold, I can sleep in a bus shelter in a sleeping bag and still get a good night's sleep. I kind of guessed that I might be able to do that beforehand, but when you don't know, because you've never done it, it's a big risk and it preys on your mind a lot. But now that I've done it, yeah, I can take that with me to the next ride and know that that's an option if I need it. And just other things like that, like how my body's going to be feeling after 7 days. Well, now I know. It's going to be tired, but it's still going to be working. So it really is experience, just having a repertoire of experience that you can call on and say, well, I did this and this and this, and it worked like that, so therefore, I can do it like this in the future. And even one ride, you learn a huge amount. And the next one, I'm sure I'll learn even more. I want to say a shout out to the guys who did the last edition of this in 2019, who did it under much more Norwegian circumstances with the weather. So we had it quite good this year, I think, with the sunshine and so on. So
you'll have to come back when it rains.
yes.